Hey, it's Michael. I'm back for another solo episode. It's been a while since I've done a solo episode, but I've got a topic on my mind, and I want to dive deep into it today. So no guest this week, just me. Let's get into it. Welcome to the follow-up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore what it means to find common ground at a time when it feels increasingly harder to do so, to listen more than we speak so that we can understand that our differences don't have to divide us. My aim with this show is to bring you perspectives and ways of looking at issues or topics that perhaps you haven't considered before, so that you can then take that new knowledge and apply it to your ability to empathize with the people around you. I'm a former journalist who believes everyone has a story to tell, and it's only when we ask questions and listen that we truly reveal what connects us as humans. Our dreams, our desires, our experiences, our ideas, and who we truly are. I don't know about you, but I love the Olympics. I watch as many of the events as I can every time that it's on. Swimming and diving, gymnastics, basketball, volleyball, weightlifting. The athlete in me loves it all. As a former distance runner, the Summer Olympics are my favorite. I love the 4x100 meter relay and just the exhilaration of seeing those athletes sprint around the track, to the marathon. It all captivates me. One of my favorite things about the Olympics is seeing the best athletes in the world at the peak of their performance. I really like analyzing runners' strides, their mechanics, their breathing, and one of my favorite things to do is, while my wife and I are watching the Olympics, I like to see if I can pick out who will win based on my read of their biomechanics. One thing I can never account for, though, is an athlete's mental state. I don't have that kind of insight, and no amount of me judging the length of Allison Felix's stride or Michael Cherry's start out of the blocks, none of that will give me any insight into what's going on inside their heads. And that's actually one of the reasons I loved being a sports writer. I got the opportunity to talk to the athletes one-on-one in many instances and ask them questions about what they were thinking and feeling that you could never know from just watching the game. Now, this last Olympics, just a few weeks ago, in July 2021, the U.S. gymnast Simone Biles, widely considered to be the best gymnast in history, the GOAT, if you will, she withdrew from the team final, the individual all-around competition, and most of her individual events from the Olympics. She withdrew, citing mental health reasons. She was in her head so much that she said she developed what gymnasts refer to as the twisties. Now, this is a new word for me. I'm sure it's a new word for you, but it's apparently what happens when a gymnast can no longer locate their body and its relation to the ground as they perform their aerial moves. The twisties. A gymnast like Simone Biles, a gymnast of her skill, performs some of the most dangerous moves ever attempted in the sport. And for her, or any other gymnast for that matter, to lose your proprioception can be devastating, even deadly. And by the way, I'm a certified personal trainer as well, and proprioception is just a fancy term for your ability to perceive your body and its movements through space. That's proprioception. When Biles withdrew, seemingly everyone and their mother and brother and father and aunt and uncle had an opinion about it. For reasons I don't understand, people cared a lot. Like, a lot. I found it odd, considering that for many of the people who displayed the biggest desire to have their opinion heard about Simone Biles, gymnastics barely registers in their consciousness, but for once every 4 years. Or I guess in this case, 5 years since the Tokyo Olympics were delayed a year due to COVID. I saw people accuse Biles of quitting on her team and country. I saw people call her weak, soft, and someone who buckles under pressure. I saw people lament that she was setting the example that it's okay to quit when things get hard, and that people who actually supported Biles' decision were glorifying quitting. I also saw in more than one instance people invoke Teddy Roosevelt's famous Man in the Arena speech, saying that Biles removed herself from the arena and therefore was subject to this level of harsh criticism. The Man in the Arena goes, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." And you can look it up to read the rest. In the sports world, there's a phrase called armchair quarterback. Everyone sitting on their couch or in their recliner sure do like to have an opinion about the athletes that are actually, playing the game or competing. Sure, I get it. Athletes are subject to criticism and critique that comes with the territory, that comes with the spotlight and the fame that they have sought out as part of displaying their remarkable talents and skills. It's part of it. But I often find it funny to ask, or maybe perhaps interesting, to ask if the most vocal critics could perform at the same level. It's interesting to ask that question. The people with the loudest voices, could they perform at the same level, facing the same pressure, under the same expectations as those athletes they judge? Now, the answer is no, because if they could, they'd be there. The vast majority. I understand there are former athletes, whatever. But that's why invoking the Man in the Arena speech seems so odd to me. This speech from Roosevelt criticized the person on the sideline, not the athlete. The vast majority of us will never know the athletic achievements of an athlete like Simone Biles, nor will we experience the pressure she faces. So without that background, to dissect and critique the competition decisions she makes, or any athlete, especially when we have the benefit of time and hindsight, we're not in the moment making those decisions, it's wildly misguided, considering the only people with a true grasp of the situation in this instance were Biles, herself, her family, her coaches, and her teammates. It was later revealed that while Biles was in Tokyo getting ready to compete, she got the news that her aunt had passed away. She was alone in a foreign country and she was grieving. And despite all that, she went on to compete in the balance beam event and eventually earned a bronze medal. I believe she called it one of the most rewarding medals that she has ever earned, despite all of her previous success and titles and Olympic gold medals. And again, what I found interesting was that not one of those people who initially labeled Biles a quitter had a thing to say once that news was revealed. Which is why I asked the question on my social media, if someone, anyone, removes themselves from the quote-unquote arena in their life and says it's for mental health reasons, why is our first and only response not, "I hope they're okay"? It's perfectly fine to not have an opinion beyond that. Now, it just so happened that my guest on the show, the week of Biles' withdrawal from the Olympics, it was Matthew Barzun, and he and I actually discussed in our conversation the famous Man in the Arena speech as well. And he brought up a fascinating point. While it sounds good and feels good and dramatic, that speech actually presents us a false duality of choice. You either stick it around and you fight it out, or you quit and you sit it out. Those are the only two options. but those are not simply the only two paths. Check out that episode. It's episode 52 to listen to the full conversation. But Matthew also wrote in his book, The Power of Giving Away Power, and we didn't actually get to discuss this particular section in our conversation, but he wrote that we so often adopt a heavy voice that tries to convince yourself and others that you have it all figured out. That often wrong but never in doubt tone of voice that is meant to sound certain and win arguments, but sounds more than a little controlling. And that's what most confused me about Biles' situation. There was so much self-assuredness being tossed about. And for what gain? For what reason? To what end? If we ourselves have never been in that arena, why do we feel so much pressure to argue a viewpoint or opinion that is so terribly ill-informed and boil everything down to it's either right or wrong. It's either yes or no. It's either compete or sit it out. Often wrong, but never in doubt. To perhaps explain why this might be, let's talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. In a paper published in 1999 by Cornell University psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, what is now called the Dunning-Kruger effect was presented to the world. The Dunning-Kruger effect explains how often people wrongly overestimate their knowledge of a specific topic or their ability with a particular skill. Now, more pointedly, it is a lack of self-awareness that prevents them from accurately assessing their own skills, abilities, and reasoning. Dunning and Kruger wrote in their paper, "Those with limited knowledge in a domain suffer a dual burden. Not only do they reach mistaken conclusions and make regrettable errors, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize it." Dang, y'all. Dunning and Kruger held nothing back there. It actually reminds me of one of my favorite quotes ever from astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think we all know Neil, when he said, "One of the greatest challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think that you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong." Often wrong, but never in doubt. Why do we do it? A Psychology Today article on the Dunning-Kruger effect chalks it up to, in part, our desire to appear smart, like we have it all together in order to hold influence. And this article reads, "Confidence is so highly prized that many people would rather pretend to be smart or skilled than risk looking inadequate and losing face. Even smart people can be affected by the Dunning-Kruger effect because having intelligence isn't the same thing as learning and developing a specific skill. Many individuals mistakenly believe that their experience and skills in one particular area are transferable to another." Kind of like saying, "I would never quit my rec league softball game. I would never let my child quit, so Simone Biles shouldn't quit in the Olympics." See how ridiculous that sounds? Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic? My 90s kids will get it. In our rush to appear competent, we display such incompetence, to use Dunning and Kruger's words. And it's not just the fault of the person claiming to know more than they actually do. Another study that I came across found that we, the recipients of that feigned competence, we see people who exhibit this type of behavior as being more right, even when presented with evidence to the contrary. We're suckered into it too. The study states people are more influenced when others express judgments with high confidence than low confidence. And here's the thing that is most scary. when we are quick to form an opinion, and especially when we vocalize or publicly state that opinion, like posting it on social media perhaps, it is nearly impossible to change our minds. Because then things like confirmation bias settles in, where rather than going and seeking objective truth, we seek the truth as we believe it to be, based on the opinions that we've already so quickly formed. We seek out studies and podcasts and articles and other personalities that merely confirm what we already want to believe, even if it's in the most minute and inconsequential details that we then expand up to relate to a more broader topic. We blow it out of proportion. And then our brains begin to disregard new information that doesn't fit the pathways that it's already begun to create, because that requires a lot of energy and effort. And our brain doesn't like to do that. We don't want to look inadequate. We don't want to appear unconfident. We hate saying those 3 uncomfortable words. I don't know. Which is why I now ask the question, why would we ever rush to form an opinion if we know we're likely stuck with it forever? And I'm not saying it's impossible to change your mind. In fact, one of my favorite books is Adam Grant's book, Think Again, where he outlines ways and methods for doing exactly that, thinking again on the topic, keeping an open mind. I highly, highly recommend that book. But being slow to form an opinion and then being also open to and willing to change your mind is a skill that must be consciously practiced, and many of us simply don't. So how about instead, we lead with empathy and commit to the slow formation of opinions, and we leave it at that. Let's revisit Biles' situation and place yourself in her position. And understand that it took a full week to reveal all that she was dealing with. Grieving over the loss of a family member, being alone in a foreign country because of COVID-19 precautions, not feeling confident or able to safely perform dangerous athletic maneuvers, but knowing that if she competed, the only acceptable outcome in the eyes of the judging public for an athlete of her stature would be gold. Nothing less. How would you have responded? If Simone Biles was your daughter, or your sister, or your spouse, or your best friend, and she came to you with this weight of a decision, would you have pushed her to compete with the vigor that so many of the armchair quarterbacks so self-assuredly demanded of her? Or would you simply ask a question? How are you doing? Are you okay? You don't have to have everything all figured out all of the time. You don't have to have an opinion about everything, and in fact, I submit that you shouldn't. Instead, lead with empathy, extend grace, be wary of your initial response to stimuli, and then ask questions. That's my plan. Thanks so much for listening to this solo episode of The Follow-Up Question. I appreciate it. If you got value out of anything that I said today and you think others need to hear it, please at least share the episode with somebody you know, or share it with your network, post it on social media, tag me, and let me know that you're listening to the episode. I would greatly appreciate it. Go and leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts if you have the time. Again, another thing that I would greatly appreciate you doing to help the show grow and help others learn about the show so that we can help others, everyone, learn how to find common ground and ask more questions. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you can always reach out to me. It's michael@thefollowupquestion.com. That's my email. Or you can go to thefollowupquestion.com and reach out through my website there. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow-Up Question. And until then, keep asking questions.